Hi everyone, it's the tiniest one back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Cooler Master Silencio 600. It's a silence orientated case that comes in at, for a silent case at least, at just $89.99, but sadly it should have been a bit cheaper. No, it should have been a lot cheaper. So at the top and the front, you have the power button right at the very front there. Then you have the reset button. Behind that, you've got two USB 3s. And then you've got a combined headphone and microphone jack port. And then you've got an SD card reader. And the SD card reader actually is wired internally as a USB 2 internal header, which is kind of nice. Keeps all the lines kind of clean. You don't have to worry about adding card readers and stuff to the case. But because it's wired to USB 2, if you're like me and you end up using super duper fast SD cards, it'll end up actually hampering the speed of your cards, because I've got cards here that will transfer over 200 megabytes a second. Whereas that port is going to stop about 20. Now, on the roof, there is a removable panel that we can just get our fingers underneath and grab here. There's a sound deadening underneath, a little bit of bitumen, nice bit of cloth. It's very familiar. It's all, you know what I mean, you're used to it. And then underneath, you do have an offset set of 120mm fan mounts. That does mean that you can put a 240mm AIO in the roof. Oh, flipping it. Come on, let's focus. It means you can put a 240mm AIO in the roof, get a decent amount of offset. That's a really nice thing. You can also add obviously just fans into it as well if you want. When we do our thermal testing later on, the bulk of the testing that we've done is with this on, because obviously it comes without fans, although you can in the roof if you want, and you want to turn it into an intake. I'm not sure why you'd want to, or at least clean the lines up as well. There is a magnetic filter that you can put in the roof, but like I said, I wouldn't necessarily use this as an intake and then have it as a dust filter. I'd personally use that to clean the lines up on the roof. And yes, I haven't unpackaged it, but we're trying to whiz through things as quick as we can. Front panel then actually looks kind of nice and clean and, you know, pretty plain. You've got just here, if you can get it in the right light, there is Cooler Master, the kind of oval logo like the power switch. And you've got like a semi kind of textured front, so it's kind of like a satin, and then the outline of the logo here is gloss. You can just about see it there on the camera. Anyway, pop the front open. You can see that you've got some foam on the back of the door. It's all rather nice. And then you've got an optical port here, and then you have a dust filter here, which is easily removable. Looks very fractal orientated design in the front of that. And then this is where it kind of starts to go wrong, because you can see you've got a single fan in the front, not necessarily an issue. You've got a fan mount in the bottom, which hasn't got one in, which is half on the underneath the power supply cover and then half above. But this bothers me a little bit, because if you do pull the front of the case off, which I will do, you can see that you've got your 5.25-inch drive cover thing in the top. But then, now you're going to think this is quite strange, but the optical bay that's inside this is removable, so that's lovely. So you can still, if you want, fit that third fan in the top. But the problem is on the door itself. So if we do open it up, you can see that the shroud here, it actually sits that little bit kind of further out. So when the door closes, it completely closes everything off. You can see my finger, that's right at the very edge of where that plastic goes. So it's always going to mean that this top section of this fan, if you were to use it, would always be a kind of like hindered. Now there is a little bit of airflow there, but you're not going to get anything really through it. If it was me, we'd end up getting the Dremel out and having to cut this section away so that you can get airflow, but then that means that it's going to get around the dust filter. This third fan idea, it's cute, but it really doesn't do anything, and that is literally kind of the best of the things that's wrong with it. Round the back to a fairly standard kind of layout. You've got 120mm fan mount in the back, which you can move up and down about 15mm. Got normal amount of expansion bays in the back, just the normal 7. And then you do have to pop these 2 screws out to be able to access the screws to be able to screw your graphics card or your expansion cards in the back. You've got a power supply in the bottom, and the power supply does have a dust filter, but it's not removable easily, so you literally have to turn the case upside down to be able to remove it. It's literally just a small bit of dust filter. Now, I don't see this as particularly being an issue, because you're not, you know, in reality with decent power supplies nowadays, the fans don't really run that much anyway, so you probably wouldn't need to do it that often. Now we've kind of got round the side, you can see that you've got a metal base to the case. And essentially you can see the satinness there, that's not removable, but that's pretty much where the where the power supply cover is. And then you've got the glass top. And what I will say is you can get the glass version, or there is a full steel version with another layer of bitumen on the back, and you can choose that when you buy the case. They say that it is a little bit quieter with the double steel case rather than the glass, but I think that the glass is probably the best bit about the case so far. When we pop around the back, it's you've got thumb screws on the back, and they're the non-removable ones, although they can be a little bit more difficult to get in. Really easy to remove and replace the door, and again it's got another layer of bitumen on the back to help with sound deadening. Around the back of the actual case, it's a fairly kind of standard layout. Power supply in the bottom. There is a mechanical hard drive cage in the bottom for 3 mechanical stroke 3.5-inch hard drives if you want it. Then there is 2 2.5-inch hard drive mounts in the back, and they've got kind of a funky way of installing the solid state drives. So if we were going to install a solid state drive, we would need to move our cables out the way, but it's this that I really wanted to show you. And it's the rubber grommet, and this is how the solid state drives are fitted. I actually really like this. This is probably my favourite thing about the case in total. So we've fitted one there, but if you were to fit all 4, then what you do is you get your solid state drive, and you have to screw these little pegs into your solid state drive. Now don't worry, because there are 2 sorts of threads that you can put in solid state drives. They've actually thought through, and you get both sets of those threads in the pack, so you can get a load of them. You haven't got to worry, depending on which sort that you've got. And then long story short, the solid state drive then just pushes into that rubber grommet. And if I'd have fitted all 4, which I probably should have done, it would fit there all nice, and it literally just hangs. And it's actually a really nice and clean and lovely, easy way of doing it. And this is my favourite part of the case. So congratulations, Scootermaster. I really like this. I'd like to see this on more of your cases. The only thing that I would say is when we get round to the other side of the case, the massive holes that are on the power supply cover, I think are that little bit too big. But while we're kind of zoomed in, what we can do is see a massive CPU cutout, which we've got really kind of used to nowadays, but it's still nice to see a decent one. And then you do have a couple of grommets down the side for cable routing, but that's pretty much it. And then you can see the large area at the bottom, which we're using as a cable kind of stashing place, but that's where your mechanical hard drives would go in the bottom. Power supply wise, you'll be able to get up to, well, you'll be able to get about 120mm in there, but with, sorry, 120mm, that's a 160mm long power supply in there. You can get up to 200 in there, but you'd find it very difficult with your cable, so maybe up to 180. The 160 standard length is definitely the way forward, because then you've still got a reasonable amount of space to put your cables in there. And like I said, we've stashed our cables, and that's despite the fact that you do get a decent amount of space on the back of the case to be able to hide them all anyway. Round to the business side of the case, and we'll take the thumb screws off, and then we take the case off. Now what you have to do is you have to kind of, it's kind of strange, but you have to slide the case in and then screw it, because there's little indentations at the bottom which just allow us to kind of rock it in. But it's still a nice glass door, I do like it. And then we get to see the insides of the case itself. Now straight away, the reason why I've left the back plate off is the fact that you can see that there is a large section at the front that is open, and you can see that right the way through. and I think there should have been some kind of cover there for that. If we scroll along, what you can see is those 6 indentations, those little 6 raisins. That's a space for 3 more solid state drives or 2.5 inch drives if you'd like to use them. If we come up, you can see the mount at the top for your optical bay should you need it. And you can also see that there's fairly kind of like dead plain area at the front there that I think they could have done a little bit more with. Or even, to be fair, if they weren't worried about like radiators and stuff, because you can't really get a 360 in there because of the airflow at the top that I've already showed you in the front of the case. And you can see where the dust filter kind of goes in, and it's just, I don't know, really doesn't bode well with me there. Yeah, it's playing on my mind a lot. Single fan in the front, goes up to 1250 RPM. If I spin the case round, there is another one of them in the back. Testing, yes, testing. So we use a 980. It's just because it's something we banged in there. I had a couple of them from like years ago when they first come out, and it's just a kind of a nice middle ground for a graphics card. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. Anyway, we fix that at 60% fan speed for all of our tests. Then what we also do is we've got the Cooler Master 212 Black at the top. It's just a nice middle range air cooler, which what we do is we wire it direct to the power supply, but with a 9-volt fan speed reducer. And that's so both of these items have fixed fan speeds, so that then it's only the variables in the case that should technically change any of our temps. What we do is we run a 600 RPM case fan test. Then we do 1000 RPM, and then we do a max. Now, all of the cases are going to have a different max. Some are going to be 1250, like this one. Some go up to 2000, maybe even above, depending on the manufacturers later on, but it gives us a good kind of indication between them. The 600 and the 1000 does kind of pick a very fair point out between the cases, though. You do need to kind of remember that with some cases, they may have more case fans in the front, maybe have extra roof fans, and all that sort of thing. Now with this, I am going to say it didn't test very well, much warmer than I was expecting. Now, Cooler Master, in their defence, do say that this is a very, very silence orientated case. But you can see the graphs popping up, and it's at the top of the graphs. Now, it's at the top of the graphs because it's the hottest, and that was the way I kind of sorted them. Now, I have also separated them out between CPU and GPU, but it still didn't make any difference. It was the warmest on every single one of them. And the other thing that was kind of worrying me quite a bit, to the point where we thought we had issues, we actually genuinely thought the graphics card was on its way out, was it was hitting 80 degrees. Now, with the temperatures you're seeing in the graph, you can see it says like 59.2, but by the time you take the room temperature off, that number that you're getting in the graphs is the delta. So if the graphics card is 80 degrees and then you have a 21 degrees room temperature, we will be just giving you a 59 degrees temperature. And the graphics card was hitting 80 degrees for the first time ever. Now that's quite a big statement, because I genuinely didn't think things were ever going to get worse than the Corsair 678 when I tested it, because it wasn't that great for airflow at all. And that was even though it had a case fan in the roof going in to help keep the CPU cool. Well, this just didn't do that well at all. Now, I did do just a single set of tests in the graphs, because if I'd have done this second bit for you and put it in the graphs, the name on it would have been really long. But I did try taking the roof section out. Now, I didn't add any extra fans in it or anything like that, I just took the roof section out. That dropped the CPU temps by, at 600 RPM, 5 degrees. So the top of the case did need a little bit of extra airflow to help get things out. The GPU difference, just by taking this out, was about 2 degrees across every single one of the tests. So it did, a little bit of difference, but it still meant that it was the top of the graph in every single one of the tests. Now, I do say about the Corsair 678 being like the warmest one we've ever tested, but it is twice the price. So you would kind of think to yourself, yeah, okay, do you know what I mean? You get a decent, kind of like reasonable price silent case. But the thing is I think it's got one too many flaws on this one, if I'm 100% honest. Anyone can make a quiet case by not really spinning the fans up. or making the fans so that they're really silent, but they're really silent because they're not moving any air. And this case is absolutely starved of airflow. There's just not enough airflow in the front. It needed that sorting, and it's not because there's not enough gap in the front here either, because it's actually got a reasonable standoff there. And that was another thing. I know people are now shouting at the screen, did you open the door? Yeah, it made sometimes 1 degree difference. So it's not particularly because it's too hampered in the front, it's just because that front fan's not good enough. And the problem is when you kind of get to the point where if you were going to buy this for an office system, that would be great. But then a lot of offices nowadays do GPU intensive tasks. You might be using it for Photoshop. You might be doing video editing and rendering. Anything with a GPU focused point on this, including gaming, I would genuinely say this is a case to dodge. And I don't say that very often, and I don't say it very lightly either. CPU temps were okay. Yes, they were warm. But for a silent case and all that sort of thing, you know, we can kind of let it not necessarily slide, but you understand that you're not going to get the best performing temperature case if you're going for silence. It's like the old days with the NZXT H440. But this does need more airflow. And I think Cooler Master deep down knew that if they changed the fan in the front to one that provided better airflow, it was then going to make it noisier. So they've kind of gone with the, oh, we'll just say it's a silence case and then make it a bit of an oven as well. Now, I spoke to Cooler Master in depth about this today. It's another reason why the video is that little bit later as well, is because I really didn't, you know, I was very surprised about quite how warm the GPU side of this was, because I genuinely didn't expect anyone to ever bring me a case that was going to be warmer than a 678C without massive excuses why, whether it was a tiny little ITX case or, do you know what I mean, some kind of like funky open design. This genuinely does just start to cook your graphics card. And it's because of that point that if you're looking at this for any kind, even a professional use, if you use, for argument's sake, anything with Adobe that uses GPU-based stuff, so the CUDA or the RTX stuff or anything like that, that's going to stress your graphics card out. I render on my graphics card for video reviews or video rendering. Then this genuinely is a case to miss, and that includes, and I mean this, it includes gaming. There's just not enough there, and I don't think it would be worth you spending the money to put it right. Not when you can get something like a Fractal R6 for £30 more, and it's instantly better out the box. It's a little bit bigger, but it ticks every single other box. And that's kind of the problem, is Fractal have been doing so well at these things for so long, it kind of then makes you wonder how they could go so wrong with this one straight out the back. Well, not straight out the back, because it's not even their first silent case. It's one of the first times in a long while I can genuinely say that I'm disappointed, and I mean very disappointed, in a Cooler Master case. Now, I even originally liked the original H500 when everyone else was saying that they were terrible. This one really is. No. Anyway, so point I was trying to get to was, I haven't used it in a while. This definitely deserves the Grumpy Cat Award. And like I said, if it's GPU focused stuff, gaming, even professional use, I'd look elsewhere.